get your feedback. I'm going to reiterate that these fees are options at this time and they are not cast in stone. We are here to get your feedback, as we were on January 17th, I believe. We went to Tabia and we met with a number of you in the room today to share this. The presentation is updated slightly, but the fees that were in that have stayed the same. It's important that we take all our input in before we start making changes. So we also recognize that these fee increases are sensitive, so we want your feedback to help us inform the fees that we go forward to our committee in April. Feedback is important. It does inform our work, and it also informs the committee members and the councillors on their decision making. So we also need to develop these in a way that supports vibrant main streets while considering the value of the public sidewalks and the need for small businesses to succeed. If you're looking for more information on this as this process goes between now and April, I'd encourage you to go to our website, www.toronto.ca, MLS Have Your Say, and send any questions or comments to us. You can go through that way, or at the back of the presentation is, I believe, Hamish's email and my own. We have received some already, and that is very helpful. So before I turn it over to Hamish, I would just ask keep our comments and questions till the end of the presentation. It should take Hamish about 15 minutes. And I would also ask that at the end of that, when we're bringing your comments and questions, that we be respectful of everyone. A lot of work has gone into this. Let's keep it professional, and one person speaking at a time. And again, we try to get everyone a chance to provide their comments rather than one person utilizing everyone's time. So with those, the opening remarks, I will turn it over to Hamish Goodwin, our Senior Policy and Research Officer, who has been leading this file for the past 2 years. Hamish?
Thanks, Carlton, and thanks again to all of you for coming out today. It's great to see so many of you here on this important discussion today. And before I get started, I'd just like to draw attention to a handout package that has been circulated. Hopefully everybody has one. At the very back, there is a comments sheet. If you would like to add comments in written format, you may do so. There's a box to the side of the room where you can leave those comments. There's also pens there. Okay, I'm just going to jump into the presentation. So in terms of the meeting format, I'll just quickly go over some of the project background first before moving into the fees. There's 2 types of fees we're going to be talking about: application fees and then permit fees. That'll be followed by a discussion about the implementation and the next steps of this project, and then we'll move into the Q&A. Okay, so in terms of why we're here, we have been asked by licensing and standards date on the status of the harmonized bylaw. So as Carlton mentioned, there's a number of existing bylaws in effect that go back to pre-amalgamation days that result in all sorts of inconsistencies, both in terms of fees, but also in terms of standards that apply for how these sorts of applications are processed throughout the city. So there's a lot of benefits to harmonizing. So the fee review is part of that exercise. Your comments from this meeting today are very, very important, so thank you again for coming. Your comments will inform the final recommendations, and we're targeting a report with those recommendations to the Licensing and Standards Committee in April. Just in terms of a quick overview of the project phasing, we're in around about the 3rd phase of the project, developing recommendations. We have done some work already on consultation, where I've met some of you in previous meetings, as well as analysis and developing options. And then the final phase would be implementation, which would start later this year and be a multi-phased implementation. So just a quick high-level overview of some of the policy changes we are excited to bring forward. This is the slides are showing what we're calling a small frontage cafe, or it would also apply to marketing displays. These would be essentially a small bench or a small table and chairs, where I'll go through the permit fees later, but we're suggesting that these sorts of configurations would have no permit fees. Secondly, there's the parklet cafes, which many of you may be familiar with from seeing these configurations in many other cities. Toronto's been a bit late to the table in this. However, we are excited to bring this forward as part of this project as an opportunity for further retail and cafe uses on our streets. Curbside cafes, these are configurations that have been introduced on the streets in essentially on a case-by-case basis. On one side here, you've got a cafe at Young and Gerard, and on the other side, it's at St. Clair. They're very successful in some streets and not perfect for every street, but they do, in addition to parklet cafes, these configurations do open up a lot more opportunities for businesses that may otherwise not have them under the current regulations. And then also we're looking at year-round cafes. So again, not suitable for all cafes or cafe locations. Where they are suitable, we think there is an opportunity to allow them to operate year-round. So you can see on one side, the cafe is operating in the warmer months, and then in the cooler period, this photo is taken in the fall, you can see the cafe has sides that drop down and allow the operator to extend their cafe season. Okay, so those are just some of the policy highlights. Moving into the fee review, starting with administrative fees. So this is a one-time fee that essentially you would pay to apply for a permit, and the fee for administrative fees, or application fees, are intended to recover the costs of the city providing that service. Currently, there's a range of application fees out there, depending both on the type of the application, being cafe or marketing, and also depending on the location of that application. So notwithstanding that it's essentially the same or the very similar workload involved to process them, you can see the range of fees that are out there in effect right now. And again, these fees predate amalgamation, which is essentially why they're so varied. So the lowest fee right now for a cafe application you can see is just over $50 in East York, and the highest fee is nearly $700 more than that in Etobicoke. And you can see the range there. So as part of the review, we looked at what other cities charge for application fees, and the range in front of you again is very, very broad, from Hamilton at a high of $1,500 down to just over $200 in Vancouver. So in addition to looking at what other jurisdictions charge, we have also done an analysis of the staff effort and workload based on the volume of applications, a 3-year average, to determine just exactly what that precise cost is to provide the service. And so we're suggesting as a harmonized fee for a cafe and marketing and parklet cafes applications that the fee would be $1,332.45. And so that's the fee that covers the application intake, the circulation of the application to utilities and other city divisions, the receipt of those comments, the public notice, the site inspection, all the work that is essentially involved in reviewing, intaking, and assessing an application. Currently, there's some other fees out there. So, for example, if you're in the former city of Toronto and the cafe is a new cafe application. Sorry, I'll just back up quickly to emphasize that this is a fee that would apply just for new applicants. So if you already have a permit fee, this fee would not apply to you. So again, if you're a new cafe applicant in the former city of Toronto on a local street or a residential street, there is a fee that you can be required to pay for the planting of a tree, and that's $3,000. And there's a whole variety of other fees in the bylaw right now as well. Moving forward, we have a suggestion that the tree fee can go down significantly from $3,000 to $652. Again, this is a one-time fee that a new applicant would pay. We're interested in getting your feedback on whether or not you think that is a good change, or if that fee is worthwhile at all. And then another new fee is an appeal fee. This is a specific new fee that would apply to the process that we're suggesting would accompany the bylaw changes. And the fee is specific to decisions that are related to the pedestrian clearway, and that fee is $300. And all the other fees that are currently in effect we're suggesting aren't necessary and will be deleted. Okay, moving into the permit fees. So the permit fees are the annual fees that permit holders pay for the use of public property. Currently, the fees that are out there are dependent on 3 variables: the location of the permit, the size of the permit area, and the type of the permit or the type of use, so cafe or marketing. Currently, there's about 8 zones in effect, again, dating back to the pre-amalgamation days. The former city of Toronto was divided into 3 areas, and the other boroughs also had their own zones. Interestingly, with Scarborough, they have a bylaw that does not allow sidewalk cafe or marketing uses on their boulevard. That is something that we'll be essentially, we will be allowing cafe and marketing uses in Scarborough moving forward. This is a map of essentially where the old boundaries are for the fee structures that are still in effect today. In terms of what the actual permit fees are, you can see them here. The fee zones are listed to the left, and then to the right of that is the permit fees. This is dollars per square meter, marketing permit fees, and then to the right is the year when those base fees were established. Just something I wanted to correct from previous presentations that I've made. The majority of these fees have increased from when they were established. The majority of them have increased on an annual basis by inflation. Two of them, specifically York and Etobicoke, the $5.50 value and the $11 value have not been adjusted by inflation since the year that those were established, so in 1980 for York. But generally from this table you can see just the age or the length of time that has passed from when these fees, or when these base fees were established. Another interesting trend to quickly point out is looking at the highest range, which is currently in North York. So in conducting the review of these fees, I'll just quickly walk you through these steps. Firstly, we reviewed the fee zone boundaries. So rather than having fee zones that are based on administrative boundaries, we wanted to have zones that were more reflective of market rates. And so we had the assistance of our colleagues in real estate services to help us with that. And essentially they've recommended 5 zones: downtown, midtown, north, east, and west. And those zones are collectively an assemblage of smaller sub-markets. So you can see here, for example, the sub-markets were combined in this area to form this downtown zone, which is here on the map. And then you've got the midtown zone to the north of it, and then north, west, and east. So that's the baseline that is the recommendation for the new zones moving forward. That's a proposal we're interested to get your feedback on as well. Secondly, we looked at the market value of each of the spaces in those zones. And again, this was work that was performed by real estate services. They looked at the average at-grade rental rates in each of those proposed fee zones, really just as a snapshot to help inform some decisions about the valuations of the retail landscape in each of those zones. Now, this is not to suggest that this is where we want to take the fees. It's just a baseline to keep in mind as we move forward. Next, we looked at the variety of public benefits that the cafe and marketing permits bring to the city. We're obviously very aware that these are well-loved uses of the sidewalk that Toronto is very well known for. It helps boost tourism. Obviously, there's lots of benefits through street animation and safety, opportunities for social interaction, employment, and retail occupancy. All of these things are well known and factored into consideration. And then we also looked at the fee categories. So currently I mentioned we have just 2 categories for marketing uses and cafe uses. So we're proposing to continue that with a slight distinction with the cafe uses by looking at a rate for patios where alcohol is served, and then a distinguishment for a cafe or a cafe use where alcohol is not served. And I'll get into that in a bit more detail as we go through the actual fees. Which I'll do right now. So I mentioned earlier for the small frontages, so either for a marketing or a cafe, where it's essentially a very minimal impact on the footprint of the sidewalk in front of the building, we're suggesting that there would be no permit fee required for these uses. This is an example on the slide of a small marketing display where these sorts of uses would be put out at the start of the business day and be taken off the sidewalk at the end of the day. Moving on to the cafe, where there would be no alcohol sales now. I would just say all of these fees are in the handout as well, so it's a little bit difficult to go through and process as I see them in front of you, but just keep in mind they are in front of you in the handout, and we can talk about them in detail in the Q's and A's. This is the proposed rate for a cafe where there's no alcohol sales versus a cafe where there are alcohol sales. Now, these rates go up slightly in recognition that there's an opportunity to make a little bit more money off the sidewalk through alcohol sales. Similarly, the rates go up higher again if you are interested in a cafe that operates year-round. Again, with the thinking being that you have, again, more opportunity to make a little bit more money off the sidewalk by the extended cafe season. The lowest fee, keeping with that thinking, would be the marketing display. Again, with the thinking being that there's less opportunity to make as much money off the sidewalk through the sale of flowers and fruit and vegetables and those sorts of things. And then lastly, the parklet cafes. Now, there's actually two types of parklets that are being contemplated. The first one is a parklet cafe, which would be sponsored by a business for the sole exclusive use of that business. In that instance, the parklet fee is, through negotiations with the Toronto Parking Authority, the parklet fee would essentially cover the lost revenue of that parking space. So the fee, which is here, corresponds to the various zones, which I outlined previously. The fee would essentially cover the lost revenue by that one parking space. Now, the other type of parklet is what we're calling a public parklet. Now, this is one that might be sponsored by a BIA, for example. This is similar this is actually an example of what took place on Elm Street, just north of City Hall last summer, the last couple of summers. So it's sponsored by a local BIA, for example, and it's, rather than being for the exclusive use of a business, it's for anyone's use of passers-by or local restaurants. People shopping there for sandwiches could go and eat their lunch there. The fee for that would essentially is here, so it's $524.77 plus applicable taxes. That's a citywide fee that would cover essentially the occupation costs for that right-of-way. This slide is a summary compendium of those fees. Again, this is all in the handouts. We can talk about it when we move into Q's and A's, which we'll do shortly. And the next thing we did as part of this exercise was to look at what other jurisdictions are charging. Now, this is not to say, again, that we want to be similar to any other city, and we acknowledge that there's different commercial rates, and we also obviously acknowledge that, that the real estate market is different in other cities as well. I haven't converted, for example, the cities in the US into Canadian dollars. I'm not really interested in taking it to that level of analysis. I think this exercise is really just interesting to see how different cities place a value on their sidewalk space and use that value essentially as either a tool to incentivize these types of uses or not. So you can see here the fees currently in Toronto are among the lowest that I've been able to find. So the proposed fees that I just walked you through places them more kind of in the middle, with Markham now in this scenario at the bottom, and then the east, west, and north zones between Vancouver and Ottawa, and the midtown and downtown zones slightly higher. Okay, a couple more slides before I wrap up. Just talking about implementation right now. The suggestion currently is that the new fees, along with the zones and the actual bylaw itself, would take effect in the first quarter of 2018. New applicants following that time would be subject to the new fees. For existing permit holders, we recognize the fees that I just walked through are substantially higher than the existing fees. In recognition of that, we are exploring how we can soften those increases, but for example, by exploring how those could be phased in over a period of time. Okay, so again, in these handouts, what we've done is to go through some sample impacts. So this one I'll go through is a sample impact analysis for a patio with alcohol. So just for your information, I did an analysis of those existing ones, and the average patio size in Toronto, where alcohol is served, is 30 square meters. So this sample impact analysis is based on a cafe of 30 square meters. You can see on the left-hand side of the table, you've got the existing fee zones, the existing rates, and the existing sample permit fee in this column here. Keeping in mind, again, it's based on this average size. Moving through the table, we've got how the proposed, where it would be located in the proposed fee zones, the proposed rates. And over here on the right-hand side of the column, this is what the new fee would be upon full implementation. So in this scenario, we're thinking about implementing them over a 5-year period. So we've taken the difference between the full impact versus the current one and essentially applied it over 5 years to get to the full rollout. And obviously the price varies depending on location. Similarly, we've got a similar analysis here for cafes where alcohol is not served, and then again for marketing. Now, in terms of next steps, the permit fees really are still under review. This is a conversation that does continue from today as well. And your comments, as I mentioned at the start, will help inform the recommendations that we develop to committee. And again, those recommendations will be going to licensing and standards in April. If you want to stay up to date with the project, I've got some sign-in sheets. Your name and email address would be very helpful. as well. You can also go to the project website that Carlton mentioned and find out more information about it. Following this meeting, we'll post this presentation, and other materials will be posted there as they become available. And then finally, my contact details. My name's Hamish Goodwin, and my director is Carlton Grant. We do welcome any comments you would like to provide to us on the telephone or by email as well. And with that, I would like to turn it over to you, and we would like to hear your comments, please. Thank you. Right, so the committee meeting itself is April 18th. The agenda is released approximately a week or 10 days before then, is that correct? So at that time, the actual report will become available online. If you do like to or choose to leave your name and email address with me, I will commit to sending you that link when it's up and live. And obviously we can send it and circulate it through our stakeholders as well. At that time, when it gets to committee, it is a public meeting, so it's probably in this room or committee room 2. If you're interested, you can attend and make deputations, either in person or prior to the meeting in written format, voicing your comments to the committee, and the committee will also take them into consideration as well.
Okay, just on that point, when the report goes live 1 week prior, that also opens up the registration to register to depute to speak on that item. As part of the live stream, and this is going to be a little inconvenient, but I would ask if you're coming up to make a question, if you could go to the front desk and use those microphones, and then we'll capture your comments that way. So if that, sorry, a little inconvenience, but that's the best way to get to that one.
They can use anyone. Oh, okay.
I think the volume will be captured if you choose to stay in your own, but to have it captured on the video, the technician will just focus on these 2 areas, I believe. Yeah, you're first, sir.
How did the real estate people come to evaluation of properties? What market rates?
Right, so in each of the fee zones, they looked at the rental rates for retail rental rates on the ground floor of those submarkets, and then applied it to the zones to determine for the zones. I mean, on the note of those those market rates, those really should be comparable to the rates that you are paying as rent, and if they're not, we'd be interested to hear from you about that as well, if those aren't at all reflective of what you're paying.
Everyone knows that the Toronto real estate market is going up 10% in the last 10 years. So businesses are paying the increased assessment values on their taxes. They're paying higher rents. Rents have gone up more than, for my business over 10 years, gone up more than 400%. And now you're looking at raising our fees on the city side of permits almost every month. And these are businesses that are closing 80% after 5 years. These are vulnerable businesses. You're looking at increasing their fees at 400%.
So thank you. Yes, we need that input. I can just confirm that this work was done, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Hamish, in 2014. So it doesn't include the last 2 years of, a market rate increase, but I do hear you, sir.
Yeah, Patrick Morrison, Kensington Market, BIA, how are you? You used the word substantial to describe the increases that you're proposing. I agree with you. I'm wondering what the rationale for that substantial increase is.
So firstly, I acknowledge your comment, and that is the word I used. I agree it is substantial. I think part of it is really, as I mentioned at the start, this is a conversation we want to have with you as to what the value of the space is. So the numbers that I presented may very well not end up being the numbers that go forward as a recommendation. So that's one point I would like to just put out there. The other, I guess, challenge of the situation is that this conversation has never happened since amalgamation. So this is a new conversation that the city is having. Some of the fees, unfortunately, do date back to before many of our time. From 1980 is the earliest. So it's a situation where we're dealing with fees from a very, very, very long time ago. And the question is, how do we balance our essentially requirement to determine a fee that reflects is reflective of the sidewalk as a public asset, with the value that the sidewalks and cafes bring to the city, and if we're not there yet, then those are the sorts of comments we want to hear.
Another word you used that I agreed with was incentivizing, and the importance of a livable city and a walkable city. I think that these numbers that you're proposing are actually de-incentivizing merchants to add to the vibrancy of our communities, and I'm going to urge you to reconsider. I've also done some math based on the numbers that that I was privy to from being with a meeting with you a week or so ago. I'm focusing on the City of Toronto Zone 1 because of where I am. So the numbers I'm looking at, cafe permit, the current cost is $78.71. That's correct? It's been stagnant since 1994? That's what I gathered from the information you provided me earlier?
Fees, the majority of the existing fees have increased annually by inflation.
Got you. Okay, so I found it interesting to note that according to the Bank of Canada, using figures from Statistics Canada, since 1994 to the end of 2016, the average annual inflation rate was 1.82%. That means over that 22 period, the average increase has been 48.78%. So it's quite possible that in my area, at that number, a cafe permit indexed to inflation would have been about $117.11 in the past year. Does that make sense to you? Is that number correct? Because I was working off the numbers that you provided in the sheet.
I can clarify. I think I was misinformed at the last meeting on January 17th, and I said they didn't incorporate that rate of inflation. After that meeting, I came back and double-checked those, and in most of those areas, it did include the rate of inflation. The City of Toronto uses a blended number for that, combination of the Consumer Price Index, inflation, volumes, and I can't give an average, but it's probably around your 1.82, it's probably 2.1 type of inflation that would be used each year.
So we're growing a little faster than inflation in terms of fee structure.
Sorry, your 48.74 is the cumulative?
48.78 is a cumulative figure. The average for the 22 years was 1.82%. So that changes some of my math on some of the things that I presented to my merchants. But I do note, still based on the numbers, this will still be accurate, that a cafe permit with alcohol, as you propose, is a 376% increase over what people were paying. A non-alcoholic cafe permit would be a 345% increase, and the marketing permit would be a 261% increase. Those are pretty hefty increases and are de-incentivizing and are going to not help the cause of Toronto having vibrant, nice communities to walk around in and enjoy your neighborhood. I'd also like to point out, we talked about real estate rates, that Toronto has been a haven for wealthy foreign investors to park their money, and we should not be penalizing the people who live and work here and force them to buy $8 coffees and $3 bananas because arms dealers in Oman are buying up condos in downtown Toronto. Anyway, I invite my other people. I see we're very well represented, but I would hope other parts of the city will come and just, these numbers are just way too high. I think something around the area of inflation makes sense, but we're not going to be able to have young people bring on new businesses at rates like these, and I think it will hurt the streetscape of the City of Toronto. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tony?
Good afternoon. Tony Lannis, the Ontario Restaurant Hotel Motel Association, and we've had several meetings on this, and thanks for your support on it. We realize it's a process. It's something council has instructed you to present back to the executive committee. I like the word vibrancy, which sort of, it's not seen when you look at these skyrocketing increases on it. You have a valid point when you're referring to these rates have not been increased for some time. But in the context of that, and I urge you to include in your report to the executive committee, the city needs to look at the disparity and the inequality in property tax of this city when you compare it to neighborhoods and to other cities in Ontario. Disappropriately, the rates are higher than your neighborhood municipalities to residential. The business education tax would be included in that. So if you put all that into the context and you move with rates like this, then it is meaningful to look at the property tax and straighten out and make it fair as it should be on it. And then the industry would support it because they would see huge reductions in something that is not fair, and they're punished by it in a area where in Toronto we have the highest leases in the country for restaurants to operate. We're operated 2%, 2 points less in margin than any other province, specifically more so from the municipality of Toronto. So that there's never mind the global adjustment, the hydro, and all the other provincial pressures that are on the line, on the operation of a restaurant. Many are struggling to be sustained, and those that are showing some revenue growth the last couple of years because more tourism, more market activity are not really increasing their bottom line. They're still there. So it is a huge issue in the industry, and the property tax could be your remedy, and I will urge you again to include it in your committee. There was a couple of years ago, there was a coalition that was established by the deputy mayor to look at that, and there was a report that's been drafted. If you need a copy of it, I have it, but I know it's in your files. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks very much to members of staff. Great to see you know, the entire senior team of MLS&E here today. ML&S rather. Sorry about the feedback. My name's Steve Mastores and I own Whistler's Grill in Toronto, 995 Broadview Avenue. Been operating for coming on 36 years. Was the first patio in the east end of the city, along with a couple of others in the East York community. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, I, you know, as a small business, employ approximately 30 people. Our industry is the first sort of job industry in Canada. You know, students during summer employment and so on. We're very often, we are the first employer for, you know, tens of thousands of people across the country. In Toronto specifically, I think you've got about 380 or 400 patios, if I'm not mistaken, that are subject to your guidelines. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but I did reach out on Friday to get this information to try and sort of put some, you know, some understanding forward with you, but it's just been dropped on us today. I know that you've consulted with BIAs, and I respect that, but there are lots of us in the industry that are not part of a BIA. It's very important for you to keep that in mind. In my case, I pay over $4,000 a year in patio costs and boulevard parking and so on, and I can tell you that it's a fee, it's a cost that we meet each and every year, and that, you know, we pay in order to continue to do business. And I suspect that most people in this room here today are people who pay to do business in the city. There are a lot of others who are in that gray area that you've referred to in your presentation that are not subject to any enforcement, from what I understand, or any fees. And I would encourage you to keep that in mind in your submission. You talked about profit margins. I can tell you that the hospitality industry operates on razor-thin margins, and any increases in the hundreds of percentages are somewhat laughable. If we were to pass on those kinds of increases to our customers, we'd be out of business in a heartbeat. Finally, profit margins are, in many cases, virtually non-existent. And depending on the type of operation that you have, you may have a cafe, and coffee is said to be somewhat profitable as a business, whereas alcohol sales, people have the impression that it's certainly profitable, but I can assure you that after many years in the industry, those revenues are very challenged in the hospitality industry. It's extremely competitive, and as a small business, we continue to do our best to stay in business and stay competitive, and thus our liquor costs are significant. Looking at the different models in the various pre-amalgamation municipalities, it's very difficult, and I understand the challenges in approaching sort of a consolidated zoning bylaw. And I've encouraged in previous deputations that a consolidation should take place, but it should be done, I believe, in somewhat of a proportionate fashion between municipalities with smaller numbers of cafes versus municipalities with higher numbers of cafes. And having operated in Scarborough, I'm delighted to hear that you're considering opening it up in Scarborough as well, because they're in the dark ages, unfortunately, as a result of old council decisions. Finally, I'd like to be, notified of the opportunity to present at committee after having a more detailed look at this, and hope to be able to depute. Thank you. Happy to answer any quick questions that you may have.
I don't have any questions, but I'll just pass around this sign-in
Thank you.
sheet. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
My name is Ali Boriri. I am running a Timothy's World Coffee in Danforth Avenue, and I've been working hard just to survive to pay the cost in operation. I'm paying $1,348 exactly for patio permit for a cafe. My average sales, like I have all the document, all the paper, and I can provide to you as you want. I am doing roughly 1,500 daily, which coming up to 45,000 a month. From the 45,000 a month, so I have to pay a 33% for just rent and hydro. I'm paying $2,600 rent hydro per month. I am paying 11% to franchisee, which is a franchisee I have to pay, no question. I am paying roughly 25 to 28% for my staff as a payroll. And I am paying 35 to 38% food costs. Put them together, we are coming to 1.2, 1.3. So I am doing minus 4 or 5%, which is affecting, I sold my house for a couple of years ago in the low market price, unfortunately, to support my business. I am putting in money year in, year out, and it's not only me, it's many, many stores, small business owners, which with the hope that it will be better, it will be better, it will be better. They sell what they have and they put into the business just to survive. And really $1,348 for the patio permit is a killer number for me, because in the whole summer, like last summer was a bad summer, I am making probably $2,000 to $3,000 net profit out of my patio. And for that money, I have to pay the fees, I have to pay for the furniture, I have to pay for extra staff, which has to look after the cleaning. So with other words, maybe it's better for me to just go to welfare and apply there instead of being a business owner, instead of putting money in, buying a franchisee with the hope that I can have a better life, which I don't have. So I totally understand. I'm not accusing anybody. I appreciate and I understand that the sidewalk has to have a fees and a permit. I just have a suggestion, is it a possibility to not compare a Jackaster, a Milestone, a big, huge company with a small coffee shop, with a small business they are running, selling shawarma or selling some like a small food for $5, $2, $3. We are the small business owners. And we would love to see the community goes well, everything is good, and we will pay the fee we have to pay. But please consider that this increases of fees and fees is not just here, is on the hydro and the rent, because when the tax goes up on property, who pay it? We pay it. The landlord divide by all the location, and we have to pay that one too. Just consider that we want to survive. We just want to survive, and I personally think that any increase, it will kill my business. The only way for me is to close it and go. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Such an animated crowd. Kevin Curry, I represent the waterfront business improvement area, and which is essentially, downtown's urban waterfront. At this stage, I'd say we're abysmally short on food and beverage by in the neighborhood of tens of thousands of seats, right? People don't come to rent or take up restaurant space in the waterfront simply because they don't feel it's a seasonal value only. And I think first and foremost is when we look at these cafe licenses, they are seasonal. Torontonians, tourists, during the summer, it's a competitive advantage to have an outdoor cafe. And that competitive advantage is to make as much money during that 6 months period to actually float yourself during the winter, right? Keep in mind that people choose service establishments so they can sit outside, not necessarily indoors. So there's a compromise where value is lost on inside seats unless it's a particularly popular location. So I look at the challenge of over the next 3 to 5 years of trying to develop a food and beverage industry in the waterfront. And people are going to look at these fees. And, fortunately enough, there's a fair amount of civic land that we're also occupying, but it's far more effective for somebody to rent out to a dentist's office, right, or charge dentist's office rates than it is to make food and beverage establishments viable. And that kind of brings me to comment on your market value. I'm assuming you're using some sort of MPAC, highest and best value usage. I don't know if that necessarily equates to what base rents are currently. I wouldn't be surprised to find that there's a large amount of establishments right across the board, but even in the downtown, that are paying a base rent significantly less than what you might perceive the market value is. As those rents disappear and properties are redeveloped and such, is that you're going to see a burden of base rent put on food and beverage establishments that is going to be burdensome enough as it is, let alone a fairly onerous rental fee to the city of Toronto. These establishments, as you put in that one slide, they're employment facilities. They enable the community. They better, when they anchor a corner, then there's an opportunity for more retail to infill beside them. It creates a vibrant business district, right? I think it would be unfair for the city just to come along and say, you know what, we now want a further piece of that. The public realm is there to support the community, and I think must be a fairly strong consideration between what you want to charge for rental fee for a piece of sidewalk and really what the real economic impact is to the community based on having that facility there. I might ask if you've even cross-correlated this with the recent TO core study, which is also coming to fruition, right? Because there's a significant amount of information there. Main State retail in general is being threatened in the downtown core in particular, and I'm sure it's into the suburbs. And there's a very, your zone, when I look at what you consider downtown, I mean, I'd say that I'm as downtown as you can possibly get, financial district, entertainment district. But when you expand that out to the fringes like West Queen West, and I'm not sure somebody's going to speak from that side, or Leslieville or such like that, those are local community spaces that have high value, have been impacted by high value assessments by impact that are basically putting pressure to the point where these people can't survive. Just a general observation on your bar chart. When you put Toronto now up against Manhattan, yeah, you know what? I'd love to embrace a Manhattan lifestyle. It's a 24-hour lifestyle. It comes unencumbered in many ways for people to go well beyond what the standards that are applied from the municipal licensing perspective of rolling up the sidewalks before 11 o'clock in the evening, right? If you're going to start charging those types of rates for a Manhattan site, then you also need to be very cognizant that you need to make severe, aggressive changes, not severe, but aggressive changes to how you apply your licensing. Just in general, one comment in regards to that, one of my biggest pet peeves that continues to stay in this report is a move from 25 meters to 30 meters for flanking cafes. I wonder if anybody could answer whether how much of that 30 meters, if it was applied, would actually dequalify a vast majority of flanking cafe restaurants in the downtown core in general. Right? You're going to take these away, and it doesn't matter if you're easing up approach to doing the application. If they have to go to an appeal process, which involves council, you're simply going to make it impossible for anybody to apply for a cafe. And to this gentleman's point, alcohol and coffee sales, you know what? They're about as profitable as each. I don't think you could. I don't know, unless you've done any real study on what the value is. I'd almost say, unfortunately for this gentleman, but I'd say coffee actually makes way more money than alcohol sales. And that's all I can come off the top of my head at the moment.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you for your comments. I'll ask Hamish to talk about the flankage piece and the notice requirement. Is that?
Yeah, sure. I do hear your comment about the 30 meters. So just for everyone's information, there is a requirement in the existing enforced bylaw from the former City of Toronto that cafes on a local street or residential street have to be located at a minimum 25 meters from the edge of the cafe to the closest lot in a residential zone. So going forward, we've looked at that, and we've also looked at the harmonized zoning bylaw, which has a requirement, a similar requirement on private property for 30 meters. So we do see some value in there in introducing that 30-meter measure for consistency between the licensing bylaw and the harmonized land use zoning bylaw. The proposal is not to essentially rescind any existing permits, and I think there's some value in exploring the grandfathering of that into the kind of the future regulatory context. So it would be a measure that would be applied to new applications where there's no existing cafe. And in the same way that if the cafe was located on private property, an exemption to that 30 meters could be secured through the C of A, Committee of Adjustment. The exemption could be secured in the case of a cafe on public property through Community Council.
Maybe you could just explain where the 30 meters comes into play. Why not just stick with the 25? And in many ways, I think it should be lower. Like speaking from a business perspective, anything that just makes it easier for, let's say, a legitimate neighborhood polling without the obligation to going all the extras. In working with, I've worked with a few restaurant operators, and the fee, the application fee is negligible in comparison to the legal fees and the time and energy that has to go into making all these appeal processes. And genuinely, and not to, is that council, in particular councilors, individual councilors, are under severe, significant pressure to, abide by the 1 or 2 votes that are next door to a potential cafe, and not the other one. And then I really do come back, have you done the science on it? Can you pull out a sampling of 100 flanking cafes that are already in existence, or look at where potential flanking cafes would be, and just pull out the measuring tape? And then how many at 25 meters barely qualify, and how many more are you going to delegitimize into the future? And, when an ownership or a bill, let's say a cafe closes and they have to come back and reapply, I hate to say it, but grandfathering is being ruled out in almost every aspect from what I understand in licensing.
I don't want to kind of take up the full conversation on this, but just to respond to a few of those points, it is definitely something that we are exploring and see value in grandfathering that specific aspect of the permit to the point of why 30. So it's in the zoning bylaw, I think primarily as a measure to address noise, and from the consultations we've done earlier, noise from cafes is a very big concern for residents. We heard that loud and clear. Separation distance between residential zones and the cafes is just one way of dealing with that noise. So that's the one of the intents or the objectives of the measure, the 30-meter measure. Another one, in terms of why bother making it consistent with the zoning bylaw, it's really a simple response, because you can have some patios that straddle both public and private property. So if you don't have the same measure applying, you would end up having a sawtooth perimeter boundary, essentially.
Hi, my name is Al Stewart. I'm the managing partner at the Pilot Tavern on Cumberland in the Yorkville area. I'm also on the Bloor-Yorkville BIA board. Looking at these costs, I get that there has to be a change from what's been in place for many years, but I just, I have a very small patio in front of my place, and we have a rooftop patio, which I think doesn't get hit by this stuff, but certainly the one on our front sidewalk would. And the numbers looking at first year makes some sense, but I look at year 5 and I kind of feel I'm glad I'll be dead and retired by then, because I just don't want to think about writing a check that size. It just makes no sense. And maybe my building will be gone, and maybe I'll be a condo by then and won't exist. But I think the Pilot's been around since 1944. People still like to go there. People are glad we're still there. People are glad we somehow hung on all these years. I've been an owner there for about 30 years. I've been going there for over 40 years. And it's a bit of the fabric of what the city is. It's a bit of the fabric of what Yorkville is. And this just puts another piece of pressure on, and a lot of the comments these other gentlemen have made, whether you're selling coffee or trying to sell some beer as well, the margins are really tight. I'm not getting rich in this business. I'm hanging on. I'm creating a lot of jobs. I started running the thing 15 years ago. We had 20 employees. Now we have about 50 in the summer and 40 almost full-time. I feel I've done my part as a business owner and a guy who has given back to society by creating 30 jobs that didn't exist and hanging on to the 20 that were there when I took it over and we were on the verge of receivership then. And this sort of thing, just like the hydro costs going crazy, our insurance costs go crazy, our rent costs go crazy. Every 10 minutes, someone tells me they're going to tear us down anyway. It's pretty tough, and I'm frustrated to see these kinds of things. I get the first year number maybe, but year 5 is nuts. It just doesn't make sense. The other thing I was thinking about is I don't want to bring up the food truck as a big issue, but it seems to me if we have to pay a lot of money to have somebody on a bit on the sidewalk, then maybe those guys should be paying a bit to having people stand on the sidewalk to buy their stuff. Because it's, they seem to get to use the sidewalk for free, and we're supposed to pay for it and pay a lot more. And it doesn't make sense to me. I'm not anti-food truck. I think the city's done some good things to push them away from in front of our brick and mortar places, but I'm the guy who pays the taxes, pays the rents, has 50 jobs, creates 50 people who are paying taxes and earning tax dollars, and the food truck guy whips in, parks in front somewhere, pays a bit of a fee. He can have a lot of people going by his truck, and none of those people have to pay a fee to be on the sidewalk while they buy his food. And then he drives back to Hamilton or wherever he came from. And it doesn't add up to me for what we're trying to do. So thanks for having the meeting.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful, Al.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
May I speak from here? My name's Al Carbone. I own the Kit Kat restaurant, downtown establishment. I've been in business for 30 years. We started out very slow. You go to the bank and they say, "What do you do for a living?" "I own a restaurant." "Well, you're self-employed." "Oh, we can't talk to you." That happens to all of us. And with the rates, rent, it's net lease. Now you're adding more nets to it. It's difficult to do business. It's getting discouraging to do business in Toronto between the traffic, the condos, and all the taxes that they pay and they create. They create wind tunnels. It's not enjoyable. It's not a walkable city. If you're sitting on the patio and you get a menu or an umbrella in your face, and then never mind when it rains and the days you can't use the patios. So out of the 6 months, you're only using maybe 3, and you're busy on a weekend, not all week. It's getting harder and harder. And I would like you to consider this is an outrageous fee chart that you have, right from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4 to year 5. It's totally outrageous with what we have to pay already. I can't go to the bank and say, "Oh, my patio is going to cost me $8,000 this year," or $4,000 when we've been paying $200 or $300 or $400. We only see 10 people there. So for 10 into 8, it's like $800 a seat. It doesn't make sense. I won't make $800 a person on that patio. And when you talk about vibrancy, if I have 2 seats out there, what am I going to pay? And it's 2 seats out there would be a seat for me and one for my dog. I don't make any money there. And when there's special events like TIFF for 2 weeks, we have an additional 3-day extension on our patio and a curb lane. That's great. It'll make up for all the bad days, but it's only 3 days. Now there's a pilot project where you're not going to have any cars on King Street. I don't know what's going to happen. If business would be better, it'd be worse. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We've been there on the patio several times, King and John.
Can I speak from here? Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
You know, we've spoken before, and you know how I feel about a lot of this, and I think that basing it on market assessment is wrong-headed. I agree with you. This is outrageous when I look at what oh, by the way, if anyone knows, I own a coffee shop on the Danforth, Red Rocket Coffee. I'm also the chair of the Danforth Mosaic BIA. I would be going from $643 a year to $4,800. That is outrageous. You used the right word. But here's the thing, when you're going to, and I ask all of ML and S as well, when you're going through this kind of exercise, I think you have to state what your objectives are. So your objective can either be to create a vibrant and walkable cityscape, or it can be to raise money. I don't think at this point you can do both. And my question is, why are we raising these prices if our objective is to create a more walkable and livable city? Why aren't we making it cheaper? No, but why shouldn't it be cheaper? I mean, there's a benefit that goes to everyone living in the city. Patios serve as anchors for neighborhoods and communities. Why charge anything at all? Why should we, let's put this argument on its head. Why shouldn't you pay me money to have a patio?
So those are comments I've heard before from other groups. So I thank you for that. It is something that we are quite honestly struggling with, to find that balance of fair value for the sidewalk. It is being used for commercial purposes. We do see a lot of the community benefits. So that is something we're considering. And again, thank you for reiterating that comment. And we spoke a couple weeks ago as well. It's important for all of us to hear, and your colleagues as well, that the impact it has on businesses, the increase in your example from 643 to 4,800 really, paints a picture. So, thank you. Councillor Davis, did you want to have a question?
I did have a question, and I'm sorry if someone has asked that, and Billy's touched on it absolutely. And that is, the City of Toronto has a user fee policy, and it says there's some that we want to have full cost recovery, some that we want at market, and some that are a blend, which is that we intend to subsidize those rates for public purposes, exactly as Billy has said. So I want to know, are these rates that Council has already decided were full cost recovery? Is that already your mandate, that you must come back with full cost recovery?
I would say that is not our mandate. And I'm going to clarify a couple points. Full cost recovery relates to the application fee, to take it in, to circulate it, and to process it. The fees for the use of the sidewalk are market.
Meaning
it could mean a few things. We need to again find that balance of what the market will bear, not for us as a revenue generator. And I stated this 2 weeks ago, that this was not us going away to find a revenue to help us fund other items. That was not the case. So the market, it's finding that balance of what is fair value for the use of the sidewalk for commercial purposes, with the community benefits from animating the streets, having people out there, creating employment, making sure businesses are successful.
And the market rate is based on assessment value in that neighborhood? What is the market that you're judging? Because there's no one else charging for the use of our sidewalks. Do you know?
Transportation does, Toronto Buildings does, several other, there are encroachment fees, there are crane swing fees,
Okay,
there are a number of city charges rent for buildings.
But there is nothing at this point. So this is a market, it's in the category called market fees?
I think under the City of Toronto Act, it's referred to essentially as like a rental fee, but our authority to charge it does come
No,
from...
that's not what I'm talking about. There is a City of Toronto user fee policy.
Right.
And there are these categories that everything got slotted into. So were these cafe fees part of the market fees category, or they were not yet categorized?
So the application fee that I walked through is within the scope of the user fee policy. The permit fees, it's my understanding that the user fee policy does not apply to the permit fees. The user fee policy is essentially a policy to guide the formulation of fees to recover the cost of providing the city service. So in that instance, the user fee is the application fee. The application fee covers the cost to intake the
So
application.
how is the city service in downtown more costly, for instance, than the city service outside of downtown?
The recommendation is for one citywide application fee.
Okay. I'm absolutely shocked that these fees are so disparate and have been in place for so long. I had no idea. It's shocking, actually. But I do think we have a policy objective that Billy has just identified, and that is to have vibrant streets. And so there is a policy rationale that could justify lower rates than these. Is that
Yeah.
fair to say?
I would agree absolutely. I think what I'm hearing quite clearly is that we haven't factored that in enough. And I think we've got some homework to do to go away and think a little bit more about that. Just to add to the point about why we charge the fees, I think for fairness, it is necessary to charge some fee. There are some patios right now that, whatever you want to call them, bandit operators, that sort of thing, that don't take the courtesy to get a permit. I think a permit is necessary so that we can ensure other city objectives, such as sufficient space for pedestrians to move along the sidewalk. That's a very, very important objective that needs to be factored in as well to this exercise. And so there's related enforcement costs from that as well.
My name is Joseph Baltine. I got a flank patio on Church and Isabella. It's a cafe. I brought in the alcohol thinking that it would help. I do have an 80 capacity patio. It's on a flank. Going through some problems with the co-op building across the street from me. So there's always money being spent on lawyers and amending patio permits and liquor license to push it from 11 to 1 to make that extra money. So $3,000 there. I got robbed 3 times. I've only been open for 2.5 years. I got robbed 3 times. Each time cost me about $2,000. They took 3 TVs that even last 2 months. Can't go to the insurance because your $2,000 fee before you even collect anything. So I'm trying to figure things out. I look at the bigger picture. I have a lot of friends that work in banks, and you guys kind of hit the restart on all jobs where people were making $80,000 after 15 years, and now they're making 45, getting laid off and making 45,000. So there's less money being made, and fees are going up. There's a lot of people coming from Vancouver now to Toronto because Vancouver's cooling off and Toronto's becoming hot. It sounds like a lot of people are discouraged. You guys say Toronto's the greatest city in the world. Well, if that's the case, you got to work with your small businesses and businesses in general and make them grow, not sink them, in a sense. Like, I pay $3,000. I'll be paying $3,000 February 11th. To $8,000, that's scary. Selling coffee, high margins, sure, but when you're paying high lease, it really doesn't matter about your margins. There's always costs that are popping up here and there. You guys need to factor that in. I understand that there has to be a permit fee for a patio. It's understandable, but when you're battling, co-ops and you're battling, drug dealers and crackheads and unfortunate people on Church Street, excuse my language, but I had a meeting with Wong Tam at 519 with other businesses. People are flopping, man. They're dropping left, right, and center. You guys need to open your eyes. If you go down Queen Street, there's a lot of businesses, there's a lot of stores that have shut down. It's like a ghost town. I don't know if that's what you guys are calling the greatest city in the world. It doesn't look too great. I come from Mississauga and then Georgetown. I moved down here with my wife 2.5 years ago, man. I'm starting to think I should go back. You know, I love Toronto. I used to come here and spend a lot of money and go out and, you know, hit all the patios on College Street and stuff like that. But you guys really need to start opening your eyes and taking a look at the bigger picture, you know. There's people that are starving, and there's people just trying to make ends meet after 30 years still struggling. That doesn't make sense. I'm hoping 30 years I'll be retired and get out of here. So it's very discouraging to look at these fees. You know, it doesn't give you the drive that, you know, you guys should be giving us in a sense. So I hope you guys will take a look at this. You know, it says proposed, but I have a feeling it's already been pushed through. So we'll see what proposed means. You know, City of Toronto is the city. You deal with the population and you know, you listen to the population, you listen to your people in a sense and take it from there. But I hope you guys will listen to what the people in here are saying right now, because it sounds like there's a lot of people that are discouraged. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph.
We have the patio built out and there's application fees and permits that are paid. We pay each year and there's not much, if anything, we get in return from it. There's very little administrative cost that the city incurs on their end, and it's simply revenue that is going directly to the city, and we don't get anything out of it. If we were to remove our patios and have empty sidewalks, what would the city have? They would have less vibrant streets and, you know, ghost towns. So, you know, I guess my overall point is it costs the city nothing for us to have patios other than perhaps to ensure there's sufficient space for wheelchairs and pedestrians, but beyond that, the cost that the city has is minimal. So I don't understand why we're paying much, if anything, much less to say these kind of exorbitant increases in fees.
Thanks, Elliot. John?
Thank you. John Carew with the Toronto Association of BIAs. And I'm not going to go down the route of the fees. I, absolutely know that you heard from us on the 17th, and I'm so happy to see a number of other BIAs and some of our members coming out to speak to that item, and I'm sure you'll take all that into account moving forward. Just a couple of items that maybe weren't touched on. As a reminder, they were definitely touched on the 17th. If we can get the zone maps out there, and those zone maps at the moment are proposed literally down the middle of the road. So you're going to have on one side, on the north side of the street, a fee that might be several $1,000s more than the fee on the south side. Both belong to the same homogeneous neighborhood within the same BIA. I think that I would really reconsider where the boundaries are being placed and not down the middle of the road. It's a point that I know was made on the 17th, and just a reminder that we need to keep some consistency out there, and it's all about competitiveness, et cetera. The other point really comes down to the importance, and a number of people have spoken about this, as we continue to build this city out, and the developers are absolutely, you know, sort of ruling the roost out here, we continue to build 600 and 700 square foot condos all over the city, not just in the downtown core, but all over the cities. It's these patios, these cafes that are sort of out on the streets that have become the living rooms, dining rooms, and kitchens of those people that reside in those cafes. They've become a necessity, and we talk about wanting to be like Europe, and, you know, anybody that travels out there, there is opportunities for people to sit and enjoy these spaces. So again, just to reiterate the importance of the cafe culture, of the patio culture, because partly our urban planning in this city is driving further and further the need for these facilities to be out on our streets. So like I said, I'm not going to touch on the rates, because I think you guys have got the message loud and clear, and hopefully when that report comes out, we'll see some movement and some opportunity, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Just to your point about the fees, and to you and as well as to everyone here. So in response to what you said about the boundaries, there is the option, I guess, of, or the question essentially of, do we need fees? Perhaps there's an opportunity to just have one consistent fee citywide, but then, I mean, I have questions about that as to whether or not someone in the West District should be paying the same as the downtown, but if anyone has any comments about that, I would welcome those. And then don't forget there are other fees that were proposed, such as the tree fee or some of the other ones that went through, and if you have any comments about those as well, that would be welcome as well.
I wondered about the appeal fee. What, the appeal fee that I heard when I was here at the beginning, what is that for?
Thank you.
That's Chris from Transportation Services or Public Realm to respond to that.
Great, yes. With any application, there's an opportunity to appeal the decision that's made either by Municipal Licensing and Standards or Transportation Services. So in instances where the appeal is for reasons of how the sidewalk is designed or managed, in other words, how wide the sidewalk pedestrian clearway is, that's the piece that pedestrians walk along. The appeal for anything like that would go through Transportation Services versus Municipal Licensing and Standards. Right now, MLS has a fee, an appeal fee associated with their component of the process, but Transportation Services does not have an appeal fee associated with our part of the process. So in a sense, what we're doing is establishing that appeal fee. It's $300, and its intent is simply to cover the costs of a staff group that would come and review the fee and the cost for the general manager to review it as well. So it is cost recovery.
To review the fee?
To
or to review the pedestrian throughway? Are you suggesting that we would vary from that? I don't understand.
Right, so there could be various reasons why a cafe applicant may want to appeal the decision on their application. It could be for a reason of fence height, or it could be for a number of other reasons.
And that appeal is to Community Council?
Right now on the, sorry, do you want to
currently
speak to that?
Yeah, I can just expand upon it. I mean, we haven't gone through the full policy scope of this project, but right now appeals that are related to the pedestrian clearway, which is defined in the bylaw as the minimum is defined in the bylaw, that would go to Community Council. There's a proposal from Transportation Services that rather than that appeal being considered by Community Council, it would be considered by the General Manager of Transportation Services.
That would be an extra cost to get a lawyer and everything else, right?
No, an appeal fee is, it's not, it doesn't require a lawyer, but regardless of which part of the appeal you choose, if you choose one or the other, it requires a bit of time for staff to review it and a decision to be made. So it's no different than an appeal fee on any other part of the application.
So you're saying that any time a senior manager reviews a decision, there's a fee to bump it up the chain of command?
Well, to be clear, the streets bylaw, which governs most of the encroachments on a sidewalk, has an opportunity for any applicant to appeal a decision made by transportation services. So it's customary for any kind of encroachment.
Okay.
If that application is refused, the applicant has that option to appeal. So any encroachment in the streets bylaw allows for that to happen, but we are still obligated to charge a fee under our current fees policy, that is cost recovery.
I don't know, that's very strange to me, but anyway, the other question I had, right now, we have had inconsistent application, and I know that lots of people know about this, inconsistent application with the throughway, pedestrian throughway. So you could draw the 2.13 separation distance depending on where tree boxes are, and tree boxes and other street furniture and so on have an impact on whether or not there is a pedestrian throughway in front of a particular business, or whether a throughway goes like this, whether it can weave or whether it has to go completely straight. And we have different permissions out there right now, all over the place, that are inconsistent. And even to this day, the decisions I witness are inconsistent over whether or not that throughway is, or that patio is granted because it does or does not meet the throughway. What are we going to do about existing patios? Are we going to grandparent them? Because we've just approved one that is a curbside one in one of the BIAs. Does that mean now that everyone on that side of the street in that block is now going to be curbside? And how are those decisions made? On the streets, is this consultation only about fees? Yes. Okay, so I shouldn't be talking about the urban design guidelines?
Still a fair question that we should address, and it's still a body of work that needs to be done, but the theory behind it, go ahead.
It's not all going to come together, the guidelines and the fees?
They do.
Okay.
I mean,
One goes to P-WIP. Chris, transportation's work goes through Public Works and Infrastructure. Ours goes to licensing and standards. They end up together at council. Theirs is on the guidelines, ours is on the harmonized bylaw.
so the short answer is yes, there's some flexibility in how one designs and allocates the space in the street. So if I know the one you're talking about, it's over by Woodbine and the...
I don't want to talk about individual examples.
Yeah. So we can take it offline. We can talk after the meeting.
No, I'm just saying, are you grandparenting what exists now? Or are we starting fresh to say, here are the new guidelines, and on January 1st, 2018, or whenever, 2019, or April 1st, whatever, all patios will now have to be in compliance with the new guidelines?
So it is something that I think will need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. We do know of patios where there is definitely insufficient space on the sidewalk just because of the sheer increase in pedestrians in the general population over the years from when that patio was initially approved. So for safety purposes, there is a need to revise or review those ones and ensure the primary function of the sidewalk is maintained. That's the obligation of the city from a safety lens. So it's something that we are still looking at in terms of the implementation and the impact on the operators.
I hope I can ask one more. No, I shouldn't get any privilege here.
Final question.
Yes, final question. Yes. There are guidelines, which I only learned about this year as well, about sidewalks that have slopes of greater than 5 degrees and a different kind of permit required and permission and application process for those that have decks. So they have and also around fencing. So are you going to be addressing decks and fencing?
All the regulations that are currently in effect are being considered and integrated into the harmonized bylaw with a view to having consistent citywide standards.
And I was going to say the consultation.
I was kidding.
The consultation you did some months ago, that Chris, you talked mostly about the design guidelines. Is that the end of the consultation on the design guidelines, or are you having any further input on those?
Yeah, so the design guidelines were part of MLS's consultation process. We went through about 20 meetings and a fairly extensive online survey. So that part of the process has been completed. And now we're reporting to PWIC, like Carlton mentioned, as part of the reporting process.
What month? Which month?
PWIC, Public Works and Infrastructure.
April.
April.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Back to Kensington Market.
Thank you. You invited comments about trees. I'm going to get to that in just a second. I had a thought about the appeals fee. It occurs to me that should the merchant win at appeal, that fee should be returned. They shouldn't be forced to pay an additional fee to have a decision go their way. That just strikes me as fair, and I think fairness is important in this process. In regards to trees, forestry and most Torontonians would like to see more trees on our streets and increase the canopy. Just on my walk to visit you here today along Dundas, I noticed how shockingly few trees there were, and the majority of trees in that walk are in a church daycare space. Why? It's prohibitively expensive already for a business to plant a tree. Why are we charging a fee to a business for planting a tree? We should be, I'm not saying pay a business to do it, but I don't see why we're making it more expensive when it's something that we all agree we want more of. So I don't understand the rationale of charging a fee at all.
Sure. I mean, I can give you a little bit of background about it, but it is a very good question. So currently, there's a tree fee, let's call it that. I don't know what the technical term for it is, but a tree fee of $3,000. It applies to only the former City of Toronto. And of that, it applies only to cafes that are new applications on a local street or a residential street. The $3,000 term value essentially was intended to cover the full cost of installing a tree in and around a location of that new cafe, with the thinking being, and this fee was introduced, I think, back in 2002, so it's been around, it's one of the more newer fees as such, with the thinking being that with cafes, there's an opportunity lost to increase the tree canopy, so the fee goes towards the general revenue, is my understanding, from forestry. I'm not sure exactly which pool of revenue it's called, but it's a general revenue to fund tree planting. So the thinking going into it as an exercise of harmonizing, forestry was very interested in keeping a tree fee in there. However, they were open to reducing it. So the fee that has been recommended by forestry, this one here, $6.52, is the same fee that would apply to an applicant for a residential parking pad, to offset the potential for forestry to put a tree in that sort of space as well.
So you're saying the cost for a business the city will come plant a tree for $652?
The fee would go into a tree planting fund. It wouldn't necessarily get you as such a tree.
So we are de-incentivizing businesses from planting trees. Yeah. That's what I'm hearing. Like, the city should be encouraging more trees. We should have shade on our sidewalks as we walk along. This is essentially a tax that encourages businesses not to have trees. That's what I'm hearing. Help me if I'm a little dense. Maybe you can help me understand it better.
Okay, so I think the theory behind it is we're all in agreement we want more trees. I think what Hamish explained was that by putting a patio in, it doesn't allow for a tree to be planted where it normally would on that sidewalk. Therefore, the money goes into a fund to put a tree somewhere else. It's the theory behind it. from Parks, Forest, and Recreation. I think that's the rationale behind it. Doesn't mean I agree with it.
Every license will have a 652? No.
Okay.
No, only a new
New
application.
application.
And it's been in place in the city of Toronto since, did you say 02? Since 2002, $3,000.
Why don't we just encourage restaurants, cafes, and bars to plant a tree on their patio? They're going to lose a portion of revenue by the size that they're sacrificing. You know, instead of charging them a fee, let's encourage them to plant a tree.
Again, the theory behind it is the tree gets planted, but somewhere else because it couldn't go there.
But why are we stuck in a mentality of it couldn't go there when I'm telling you it can?
Also, does this pertain to patios that are not encroaching on existing city trees, where there is a wide enough pedestrian walkway, trees already exist, and you're penalizing patio permit applicants with a tree fee on a street where there are already municipal trees?
That does sound accurate. However, it's accurate, and it's not my fee. It is on new applicants only if they were to come forward. If you already have an existing one, it will not be charged.
I have an existing one, but my patio is 3 years old. There were already municipal trees on the street, so we were penalized with the tree planting fee on a street where trees existed for no reason.
I have a question. I have a tree inside my restaurant. It goes through the roof. Will I be charged anything or fees?
No tree fee.
No, you're good.
I'm good? It's a wishing tree. I'm going to wish that we don't get this proposal.
Okay, so.
Thank you.
Steve?
Just a quick point, and since the councillor is expanding on the elements of this report, can you ask the Board of Health to allow pets on patios? Yes. There are jurisdictions in the U.S. that have it, lots of them, and there's a real demand in this city.
In Manhattan, they have.
Of course. Please look at that.
Thank you for the comment.
Hi, my name is Andre. I'm from Hibiscus Cafe in Kensington Market. I've been running a restaurant with a patio. Right now we're breaking even, so things are good. With raising fees, I feel like we might be just like getting rid of the patio eventually because there is not enough margin we can create with the existing model that might cause that. Also, I'm just brainstorming. One thing that may happen if expenses in general are rising, we are a full service restaurant, but we may go to like a takeout restaurant, which is one thing that can be done. So that's 2 service jobs, full-time service jobs for our little spot. I don't know about other places, but I see a lot of businesses who use that model, so that is one of the things that may be affected. And another thing, if the fees are increased, there's got to be something of value that is offered back to the public, I think, the businesses themselves. So if I need to raise my prices for food in my restaurant, maybe I need to, I don't know, hire better staff or provide staff with higher wage, or maybe get local farmers' products, for example. So I can say, I'm doing this, and that's why the price is higher. So if you're raising the prices that much, then maybe there's got to be some sort of value that actually goes back to the people that is that would make sense and make that reasonable. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ask a question regarding process. So an application's put in, MLS and transportation evaluated, and either give it its approval or not approval. There's no council involvement in that process at that point. And then at that point is when you would actually have to go and appeal it, which would then ask it to be put to council. or committee or community council?
Right, so currently, depending on where the location of the application is, the process varies. So for example, in Etobicoke, all applications have to go to community council, whereas in the former Toronto and East York area, staff have delegated authority to approve and issue a permit, provided it complies with the bylaw. If it doesn't comply with the bylaw, then the applicant has an opportunity to appeal, and those appeals are considered by community council. In the process going forward, we are recommending that the model where staff have delegated authority to review and issue a permit that complies with the bylaw be rolled out citywide. And then if there's an issue where it doesn't comply with the bylaw itself, the applicant would have an ability to appeal it. That would go to community council, with the exception that Chris outlined of the pedestrian clearway. That appeal would go to the general manager of transportation services.
So I think, as noted, a wide variety of applicants all over the city have potential one-up conflicts with either the existing bylaws in whatever jurisdiction it is now and the potential bylaw changes that you're putting forward. Is there not, so the process is that an applicant that really wants to, really wants to go through the pain and suffering of putting a cafe in front of their property or side of their property, and they might be 2.0 versus 2.1, or there's a tree box or something, that they actually have to put the application in, knowing that it's going to be rejected, and then appeal it. Is there not a way to identify these types of applications right from the get-go, knowing that they should go forward to committee or community council as part of the process?
Okay, well, we are getting away from the issue of fees, but maybe we can answer the question and then come back to the fees. Thanks, Chris.
Right. Thanks, Kevin. So I think you're right. There's got to be a method of identifying where there are issues and seeing if we can find workarounds before an applicant spends the time and money to actually bring forward an application. So from our perspective, especially during the transition period, we expect that we dedicate staff and resources to working with both permit holders and applicants to run through that process. So consider it a pre-application process, if you will, that we would prefer that an applicant picks up the phone and speaks with us directly about what those opportunities are to get the clearway in and work around street furniture than to deal with that when the application comes in. And that would be our approach.
Go ahead.
We've talked a little bit about the validity of the justification of these fees, but maybe we should talk about the difference or the distinction between applying them to Canadian-owned or locally owned restaurants and foreign-owned or U.S.-owned. It seems that they can afford the higher fee a lot more than us. I own El Arapazo in Kensington Market. I'm one of the people who spoke who would be crippled by such a high fee for a patio. And I think if there is a need for higher fees, why don't you get it where there would be the least damage in applying it? You said that you needed these fees to cover the costs of those restaurants who don't comply with the existing fees. Well, simple electrification, get those fees from those businesses who don't comply, rather than higher, making them higher for everybody else.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Jeff Cattell. I don't have any skin in the game on this. I heard about this meeting. I'm co-president of the Leaside Property Owners Association. I'm also a member of Walk Toronto. So my take on this is, as a planner, from a planning perspective, two issues to raise. One is I pick up on the councillor's questions about the whole rationale for this program. What I took from that response was that there's an administrative component, which is fair enough, an application fee, and the other piece is a so-called market fee. What I don't understand is the basis for that market fee. Market assessment is a way of, is obviously of determining relative value, but to that relative value has to be applied a rate. My question is this, and I think the councillor was alluding to this, is this a part of a revenue generation initiative? We all know that the city is in need of additional revenue, not the least after this weekend. Is this an objective of this program assigned to it by council? So my question is, what is the revenue from the program today, application fee versus market fee, and what is the future expected revenue, application fee versus market fee? I didn't see that information being available. Maybe I missed it, but I think that's really important to know. What is the total increased revenue resulting from these changes, and what is the rationale?
So I spoke at the outset, maybe it wasn't captured or I wasn't clear that this was not us as a council assignment looking for new revenue tools. We are looking to harmonize 6 bylaws into one, and as a part of that work, it's incumbent upon us to look at the fees, because the fees have not been looked at or since the late mid-'80s and early '90s. So that is the piece behind it. The rationale behind the numbers not being in there under what revenue this will bring in, because we are not there yet. We are discussing what is the appropriate market rate per square meter. Again, the intent is not for a windfall of revenue. We've heard loud and clear today that this has a significant impact on businesses, and we need to find a value for that sidewalk that allows businesses to operate, ensures that they are not closing down and we have vacant buildings. We want to have vibrant streets, so we need all of these things. So we have to determine what that per square meter rate is, considering a number of factors.
Okay, well, my contribution to this discussion would be to raise a concern about, at a very broad level, this program is unfair to the older parts of the city. What we have here in Toronto is, as in most other cities, you have businesses operating on public roads, on main streets, and we have BIAs, which are arrangements to provide economies and marketing arrangements for those businesses. But we also have big box stores and malls operating fully on private land. So what we have is a relationship in the older parts of the city, particularly where we have these BIAs. And as many of the deputants have indicated, they're in competition. They're in competition, obviously, with themselves, but they're in competition from big box store, malls, plazas that have more space, more land at a lower price. And so they're competing with lower. At the same time, these businesses are dealing with public roads where parking charges through the Toronto Parking Authority are very expensive, and they're working, and their competitors might be at the big box store where parking is free. So they're constantly in this situation of jeopardy around the cost of doing business. So I think that's the broader perspective here that we have to bring, that we do want to maintain, from a Walk Toronto perspective, absolutely. The vibrant streets which patios provide, engagements at all times of the day and the evening, that's very desirable. As long as the clearway is fully maintained for pedestrians, that's a great thing. And the gentleman from Tabia that mentioned the increasing need for public space outside of a tiny apartment is increasingly valid. So let's keep the rates. Let's not use this as a revenue tool. I know you're telling me it's not, but it would appear, unless there's an equal number of reductions in the program, in the cost, it seems pretty obvious from arithmetic that it is going to result in a big increase in revenue. And I'm not aware, you indicated it was hard to calculate, but there must at the end of the day be some estimates that might be calculated as to the comparative income revenues from the program now and the program in future. And I think, so it will result in a revenue windfall for the city, it would appear. So my sense would be to keep that, to simply look at it in terms of maybe some inflationary cost over a period of time, but not to look at it as a real increase in revenue. Because there are public benefits from these patios and from maintaining small business particularly in our tight inner and middle suburbs. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, we have about 5 minutes left, so I encourage people to, if you have something to say.
Hi, my name is Ivor Osteski. I'm a local business owner of two Aroma Espresso bars. Recently, I opened a new store and bought over an existing store. I recently opened a patio on the downtown store. Had I known these fees, I never would have done that, considering there is a South Street Burger across the street, and there's no use for one, considering it's about 70% takeaway. My Avenue Road store with many affluential people is mostly eat-in, and that patio is necessary. So as a small business owner, I look at contingencies when prices like this arise. While things like rent, hydro are mostly fixed, I can't do anything about, the contingency would be to close my doors. When you bring in prices like this for patios that are not necessary, I would, and you guys mentioned a lot of these numbers you're crunching, I would encourage you to look at socioeconomic results of this. With a cost of, now my patio would be about $6,000 compared to $1,600, I would close my patio. So you mentioned it's not revenue generating, it's more for the aesthetic and to build the community. But what happens when all these patios, like the gentleman to my left, who has a cafe on the Danforth, when he closes his patio, when I close my patio on King Street, when I close my patio on Avenue Road, I feel like while you guys were assigned to this to work to see the best way to come to a certain budget, I think you're going to have your work cut out for you in the future when it's not just business owners standing behind me, but it's also citizens and taxpayers of our community who are outraged that they paid for a condo near Kit Kat on John Street, only to have Kit Kat's patio close, who paid for a condo at 251 Richmond, only to have the patio of My Aroma close. I think the work you guys are going to have for you there is going to be a lot more substantial compared to the work you have on your hands now, and I can guarantee you, I'm sure you do have a lot of work on your hands. There's a lot of city spaces, and I think we can all agree that we need more trees, more parks, more playgrounds. It wouldn't make sense for those people, as you see there's a value of your sidewalks and there's a value on every square foot of the city, and I agree there should be a value. Somebody simple-minded as myself, I wouldn't imagine that Toronto pays itself per square footage of these parks. And if it did, would Toronto be opening more parks? I don't think it would be. So to suggest that you can raise the prices on us and we would continue to open more patios and continue to run our business is an overestimate on how deep our pockets are and how kind our hearts are. Because again, we're business people. We look to employ people. We look to employ students, full-time, part-time, seasonal. And I don't think this would be possible if you guys implement the fees that you've implemented here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
My name is David Crawford. I am here representing the St. Lawrence neighbourhood association, an association of residents in the St. Lawrence area. And we are very much in favour of outdoor patios. It doesn't mean to say we like all the ones we have. Some of them make far too much noise. Some of them fill the sidewalk. Some of them don't actually take their patio away in the wintertime. But overall, we like patios. And quite frankly, when I came here today and saw these fees, I wasn't going to speak today because I didn't think fees were of great interest to us. But I'm afraid if you have the fees that you're proposing, we will not have any patios, and we wouldn't like that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
How you doing? I'm Danny from the Beaches, Salty Dog. I just want to clear something up here. Here, it says Toronto Area 3. Is that the Beaches?
Toronto Area 3, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So my patio is 70 square meters. Where it says year 5, 2022, what am I going to pay? $8,000 or more? $8,880 or more? I'm going to pay more? Right now I pay $2,000 and something, and I'm just getting by. This is crazy, guys. Honest to God, this is crazy. You got to rethink about this. Nobody's going to be around. You know what? There's 4 patios on that beach. Already there's a few guys starving, honest to God. What's going to happen is it's going to be 4, it's going to be 3, 2, and that's it then. It's going to be 1. They're going to all close down. Can't have this. I can't survive on this. A lot of 2 or 3 other places now are borderline. This is crazy, guys. Sorry. Rethink about this, please.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anyone else?
Could I say one last thing before I go? I have to go.
Please do.
It really isn't just about harmonization, because normally when you talk about harmonization, you take a number of disparate rates and you say, okay, we're going to make them, we're going to harmonize them. We're going to make them consistent and take out the unfairnesses, or, you know, you usually harmonize up or down, and it's net zero in the end to harmonize. But you're also raising revenue. And so it has to, that rationale for why, other than we're harmonizing, I'm still really struggling to understand, because it really is a huge revenue generating exercise. And I don't see the rationale there for that.
I hear what you're saying, and I would like to thank everybody for their comments. I've written down some key words. I've heard exorbitant, I've heard difficult, discouraging, not necessary, disincentive. These are all words that we hear strongly from you. We have heard you, we're listening, and I would like to thank you for those comments. As I mentioned at the start, it is a conversation that is continuing, and I think as we move forward, you'll see some changes to the fees. And again, just like to thank you. If anyone hasn't had the chance to speak or provide their comments, again, as a reminder, there is a comment sheet. If you could leave them in the box, that would be great. Thank you again for coming out to speak with us today.
Do you know where the sign-up sheet is?
There should be a sign-up sheet being passed around.